times in the last few months, so I just wanted to do a quick demonstration on how we expect to see interior elevations handled with our projects. So just as a sample, I've kind of really quickly thrown in some interior elevations. Is way out of scale here, but it's really the concept that we're looking at. So for hypothetical rooms here, um, room 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you'll notice that each room has its own interior elevations within it, containing up to 4 rooms, sorry, 4 elevations per room. You can delete a single elevation from that room. You can also select that room and restore that elevation to that room. And that's an important feature with the ArchiCAD interior elevation tool in terms of how and why we manage interior elevations a certain way within the view map and the layout book. So this demonstration is specific to the navigator. So first of all, I want to pull up the organizer. And because we don't place interior elevation markers until the design is pretty much underway and established, we don't have this preset in our template. So here it's a blank view map, blank layout book. But the concept is that if we have our A7 interior elevations folder, then we can have subfolders in here for A7 basement, A7 first floor. We can break these down separately within the view map into separate subfolders, so they're a little bit easier to organize. But the main thing is we don't want to take these rooms with our A7 interior elevations, half inch, etc., setting up those views and add those directly into here. You'll notice that these are now just room 1, 2, etc., etc. The reason for that is that if I were to, for example, delete an elevation from here, you'll see that it's deleted there. Now if I right click and say restore, it restores to the project map just fine, but now my elevations here are essentially dead. They don't actually link to, they don't repopulate. You have to basically go back through and remanage all of those elevations. Beyond that, it's just a lot of stuff to be putting into the view map with very little organization. There's nothing organizing these elevations into a single room. So rather than moving the individual viewpoints over to the view map, what we really want to do is grab these rooms, take all of them and say that these are all A7 layer combination, half-inch scale, drafting pen set, get all the view settings set up correctly. And then once those are all set up, then we save those views as an entire group. That way, when I grab an elevation here and delete it from the elevation, yeah, it's out in the project map. But because this room is a clone of this, when I restore that, it restores here as well. Now, the other way that we can handle this, an acceptable way to do this, if we purge this stuff out of here, I'll just delete that, would be to actually create a clone folder. I usually shy away from clone folders because they can be temperamental if you go to delete one. I'll show you that here in a second. But if I grab all interior elevations, I'm not going to set up all of this, but you get the idea. You go through and you set all of this up and you say, okay, well, now all of that's set. Here's my clone folder for my interior elevations. That can go into that subfolder. The great advantage to this is if I go to place another interior elevation, here, let's call this room 5, that gets added to here automatically. Now the reason that clone folders can be a little bit dangerous, a little bit disastrous, is that if you were to take a part of this and try to delete it, well, I guess in 23 we don't even have the option to delete it, but in older projects, if you go to delete part of this clone folder, it clears out the whole folder. So it's sort of an all or nothing. And you can't take these then and resort them into subfolders. You'll notice it just moves copies of those in to those subfolders. So the clone folders are sort of limited in how we can micromanage those within the view map. But it does also mean that you don't have to keep track of which rooms are or aren't in the view map. I can add as many elevation markers it's adding by project map type into the entire folder. It's just something to be aware of in terms of adding or removing stuff. But again, just to reiterate, what we don't want to see absolutely on any circumstances is, for example, all of these rooms being saved over into the interior elevations as just a blanket running list of room elevations. Now these are room 1, 2, 3, 4, and typically we would also have orientation as part of that auto text. But you can see how a long running list like this, without the option to collapse down and sort, in say a 7, 8, 9, 10,000 square foot house, could get really overwhelming and tedious to sort through. That, among many other reasons, is the reason that we want to save the entire elevation marker. Another reason is that if I go to click on this, for example, there's certain options that I may or may not get going to just the specific view instead of to the entire marker. So, for example, the interior elevation settings I can get to directly from the view map if the entire marker is saved, as opposed to just the single elevation. Anyway, let's try and redouble our efforts and keep this straight and clean in the future. A clean view map and a clean layout book is much more efficient to navigate, and it's much more efficient for the file and the workflow.